What are the three types of commonly used flight control systems? Cable, push-pull tube, torque tube system. What is used in large metal aircraft to keep control cable tension within acceptable limits? A cable tension regulator. What is a fair lead? Cable guy that slightly deflects. How much cable deflection is acceptable due to a fair lead? 3 degrees. Where does failure of cables occur most frequently? When cables pass over pulleys and through fair leads. Which flight control surfaces are considered the primary group? Elevators, ailerons, rudder. Which flight controls are considered the secondary group? Wing flaps and all the tabs, trim tabs, spring tabs, servo tabs, anti-servo tabs. Which flight controls are in the auxiliary group? Trailing edge flaps, slats, slots, speed brakes. How do wing flaps affect landing speed and approach angle of an aircraft? Flaps increase lift of the wing, so speed can decrease without decreasing lift. Permits a steeper glide angle and lower speed for landing approach. What is a balance tab? Fixed linkage primary control surface is moved. The tab moves in the opposite direction. Servo tab also moves in the opposite direction of the control surface, but it's adjustable from the cockpit. It's not a fixed linkage. What is a trim tab? Auxiliary control attached to the trailing edge of a primary control surface reduces the workload on the pilot. What is the purpose of the collective pitch control in a helicopter? Changes pitch of the main rotor blades, increasing or decreasing lift. Why is it important for the blades of a helicopter rotor system to be tracked? Reduce vertical vibrations. What is the most effective way to check a helicopter's rotor for a dynamic balance? Balance analyzer computer. What unit on a helicopter is used to compensate for torque created by the main rotor? Tail rotor. What control operates the helicopters? Tail rotor. Foot pedals. What are the three axes of an aircraft and which control surface causes the aircraft to move about each axis? Elevators lateral pitch, rudder vertical yaw, ailerons longitudinal roll. When installing an aircraft bolt, what precaution would you take regarding the position of the bolt? Bolt head up or forward on any install. How is the propeller torque corrected for during assembly and rigging in some small engine aircraft? Leading edge of the vertical stabilizer is offset from the longitudinal center line. What reference publications should be used to rig aircraft, including control systems? Aircraft specifications, type, certificate data sheet, maintenance manual. What are vortex generators? Low aspect ratio airfoils. What factors are used to determine the proper cable tension? Size of the cable, the outside temperature. Why do control surfaces need to be statically balanced? Severe flutter. What tool can be used to measure control surface travel? Protractor. What is a spring tab? Spring to assist control surface movement at high speed. What is a servo tab? Cockpit adjustable tab, attached to the trailing edge of a primary control, moves opposite the direction of the control surface. Balance tab also moves in the opposite direction of the control surface, but it is not adjustable from the cockpit, it is a fixed linkage. How do wing flaps affect landing speeds and approach angle of an aircraft? Flaps increase lift of the wing, so speed can decrease without decreasing lift. Permits a steeper glide angle and lower speed for landing approach. Flaps increase lift of the wing, so speed can decrease without decreasing lift. Permits a steeper glide angle and lower speed for landing approach. What is the grip length of a rivet? Combined thickness of the materials. Where are special rivets such as Huck or cherry lock rivets used? Blind rivets, where access to both sides of the riveted structure is impossible. What is bonded honeycomb sandwich construction? Laminar construction, alternating dissimilar materials. Laminar construction. What type of materials are used in honeycomb construction? Stainless steel, titanium, magnesium plywood, resin, impregnated paper, e-glass, nylon. Nylon. E-glass. Resin impregnated paper. Plywood. Magnesium. Titanium. Stainless steel. What are the proper dimensions for the shop head of a rivet? Shop head is the squish part, 1.5 times the diameter in width, and 0.5 times the diameter in height after bucking. Shop head is the squish part, 1.5 times the diameter in width, and half times the diameter in height, after bucking. Where are sandwich construction assemblies used? Composite panels are used: fuselage panels, wing panels, radomes, bulkheads, control surfaces, empennage skins, or shear webs. What procedures should be used to prevent damage to the hull when drilling through plexiglass? Backed with wood, feed slowed, drill bit modified to a 60-degree tip angle. What do you do to a drill bit before drilling through plexiglass? Modify to a 60-degree tip angle. Modified to a 60 tip angle, cutting edge to a 0 rake angle, the back lip clearance angle increased to 12 to 15 degrees. What calculations must be made when bending sheet metal? Setback and bend allowance. What factors are used to determine setback? Radius of the bend, thickness of the material. When bending sheet metal, how should the grain be in relation to the bend? Perpendicular. What is a bend tangent line? Line at which the metal starts to bend. What is a joggle? Offset near the edge of a piece of sheet metal. Joggle, offset near the edge of a piece of sheet metal to allow clearance for a sheet or extrusion. What are several methods used in forming sheet metal? Folding, bumping, crimping, shrinking, stretching. Stretching. Shrinking. Crimping. Bumping. Folding. What kind of metal forming is done by bumping? Compound curves. What is crazing, and how does it occur? Hairline cracks in the surface of plastic, one side expanding more than the other. Briefly describe the anodizing process and what purpose it serves. Electrolyte bath, thin film of hydroxide on the surface. This anodizing coat is corrosion resistant. What are the proper dimensions for the shop head of a rivet? Shop head is the squish part, 1.5 times the diameter in width, and half times the diameter in height, after bucking. Shop head is the squish part, 1.5 times the diameter in width, and 0.5 times the diameter in height after bucking. When inspecting plexiglass, what should you look for? Crazing and discoloration. What procedure should be used to prevent damage to the hole when drilling through plexiglass? Backed with wood, as drill breaks through underside feed slowed, drill bit should be modified to a 60-degree tip angle. What should you do to a drill bit before drilling plexiglass? Modified to a 60-degree tip angle, cutting edge to a 0 rake angle, back lip clearance angle increased 12 to 15 degrees. Modified to a 60-degree tip angle. What causes honeycomb structure to delaminate? Moisture. What are the acceptable repair methods for bonded honeycomb structures that has been damaged? Potted repair method, laminated glass, fabric, cloth overlay. Laminated glass, fabric, cloth overlay. What size drill should be used for the common shank rivet? Diameters of 3 30-seconds, 4 for 30 seconds, 5 30-seconds inch. Three 30-seconds rivet number 40 drill bit, 4 30-seconds rivet number 30 drill bit, 5 30-seconds rivet number 21 drill bit. Three and 4 are switched, 5 is 21. What is used for hole filling in a bonded honeycomb repair? Potted compound. What is a lightning hole? Holes cut in structural parts to decrease weight. What special precaution should be observed when repairing a radome? Electrical transparency. What is a warp line? Highlighted strand in the fabric used for ply orientation. What does pot life mean? Length of time a resin will remain workable. What is a bar call hardness tester? Punches a spike into composites to determine if resins have been cured. What is done to honeycomb before repairing? Remove damaged honeycomb, either replace with potted compound, or use a honeycomb replacement plug. Biggest thing: remove damaged honeycomb. What is the difference between thermoplastic and thermosetting plastics? Thermoplastics can be remelted and reformed. Thermosetting cannot. What determines the minimum bend radius that can be used? Material thickness. What is meant by setback? Distance. The jaws of a brake must be set back from the mold line. Radius plus thickness equals setback. What is meant by bend allowance? The actual amount of metal in a bend. What is a sight line? One bend radius from the bend tangent line. What is meant by the neutral line or neutral axis in a sheet of metal? Area that neither stretches nor shrinks when the metal is being bent. What kind of metal forming is done by a slip roll, former? Simple curves with large radiuses. When hand forming a piece of sheet metal that has a concave curve, should the forming be started in the center of the curve or at its edges? Edges and work towards the center. What are the proper dimensions for the shop head of a rivet? Shop head is the squish part, 1.5 times the diameter in width, and half times the diameter in height, after bucking. What do you do to a drill bit before drilling? Plexiglass. Modify drill bit to a 60-degree tip angle. What species of wood is used as a standard for strength properties of other species of wood used in aircraft structures? Spruce is the standard of all wood. Is northern white pine an acceptable substitute for spruce? Yes, only if the pine is a larger size. Are knots allowed in aircraft wood? Within limitations, type of knot, location, spacing, and number of knots. What type of wood quality must be used in the repair of aircraft structures? Equivalent to its original strength or greater. What is the difference between laminated wood and plywood? Grain of laminated wood layers are parallel. Grain of plywood layers runs 90° with the adjacent ply. What are two types of glue used for aircraft wood structure repairs? Casein and synthetic resin glue. What method is used to prepare plywood for bending? What is soaked in hot water and then placed in a form until completely dry? What are the results of using insufficient gluing pressure when making a wood joint? Thick glue lines which indicate a weak joint. What is the recommended clamping pressure for a glued joint? 125 to 150 psi. How long should a wood glue joint be kept under pressure before removing the clamps? Pressure time will vary depending on the temperature. It is recommended that it remain under pressure at about 85° Fahrenheit for a period of at least 7 hours. What are some of the various methods used to apply pressure to joints in aircraft gluing operations? Brads, nails, screws, clamps, or hydraulic and electric power presses? Why does the strength of a scarf joint depend upon the accuracy of the two beveled surfaces? Because an inaccurate bevel will reduce the amount of effective glue area. Why is sanding unacceptable when preparing a joint for splicing? Because the dust created from sanding will clog the pores of the wood, preventing proper penetration of glue. What type of patch is preferred for repair of stressed plywood skin and why? A properly prepared and inserted scarf patch is the best repair for plywood. It uses reinforcements under the patch where the glue joints occur. Are mineral streaks acceptable in aircraft wood? Yes, if there is no decay. How do you inspect for decay rot in wood? Visual, odor, tapping, probe, prying. How can the moisture content of wood be determined? Moisture meter, or you could take a sample, weigh it, put it in oven, weigh it again after baking, and do some crazy math formula. What area of the wood spar may not be spliced? Underwing attachments, landing gear fittings, engine mount fittings, lift and interplan strut fittings. What is compression wood and why is it not acceptable for aircraft structures? Compression wood is characterized by high specific gravity. This defect is difficult to recognize and is very detrimental to strength. What are three forms of wood? Solid, ply, and laminate. What are two forms of wood that are acceptable for the repair of a wooden aircraft? Skin, plywood, and laminated. What would be the greatest number of splices placed into one spar?
2.
What is the largest hole diameter that can be repaired in a plywood wing skin when using a fabric patch?
1 inch.
What determines the required quality and strength of fabric that is to be used for covering aircraft? Pounds per square foot of wing loading, and the never exceed airspeed of the aircraft. When are anti-tear strips recommended and where are they used? Under-wing rib stitching should cover the entire top surface of the wing and underside of the wing in the propeller slipstream. What is the maximum permissible deterioration of aircraft fabric before it is considered unairworthy? More than 30% from its original required tensile strength. What should be the strength of the fabric used for recovering an aircraft? Material must be at least as good quality and of equivalent strength as those originally used by the aircraft manufacturer. What is the purpose and location of drain grommets in aircraft fabric? Allow the condensed moisture to leave the aircraft as well as furnish ventilation, located on the underside of airfoils. How are drain grommets installed in aircraft fabrics? Directly to the covering. Name the methods of applying fabric to an aircraft wing. Blanket and envelope method. What is the purpose of reinforcing tape? Used under all stitching and prevents the stitching cord from tearing through the fabric. What type of fabric is not affected by moisture or mildew? Fiberglass fabrics. What methods are used to check the strength of dope fabric? Fabric punch test, mall test. What type of machine-sewed seams are used in aircraft covering? Plain overlap, folded, fell, French fell. What should be done with structure that will come in contact with doped fabric? Protect with aluminum foil, dope-proof paint, or cellulose tape. If the original rib stitch spacing cannot be determined when recovering an aircraft, where can you find the rib stitch spacing that should be used? A. See 43.13-1b. What is the standard tie-off knot used during rib stitching? Modified seine knot. What do you call the edge of cloth, tape or webbing that has been woven to prevent unraveling? Salvage edge. What is a salvage edge? Edge of cloth, tape or webbing that has been woven to prevent unraveling. The type of fabric used for covering aircraft are organic and synthetic. Name 2 organic and 2 synthetic types. Organic fibers are cotton and linen. Synthetic include fiberglass and heat-shrinkable synthetic fibers. When covering aircraft, where is surface tape used? Sewed seams, lapped edges, and all stitching. Name the advantages of using the envelope method to cover fabric aircraft. Saves labor.
All sewing is done by machine. It's like putting on a sock. Almost stitching left to do is to the structure. Oh my god.
How are wrinkles removed from cotton fabric? Wetting the wrinkles and allowing it to dry. When is finishing tape applied? After the second coat of dope is dry. How wide should service tape be when used to cover the trailing edge of an aircraft wing? 3 inches. What is the recommended type of repair for an L-shaped tear when the legs are more than 14 inches long? Dope on a patch if the never exceed velocity is less than 150 miles per hour. Name the safety and health precautions to be observed and operating a dope room, including storage of materials. Dope room well lighted and ventilated, spark-proof motors, lights and switches. Dope and paint rooms should be isolated from the rest of the buildings by metal partitions and fireproof doors. Materials stored in fireproof containers. Dope area well lighted and ventilated, spark-proof motors, lights and switches, materials stored in fireproof containers. Dope and paint rooms should be isolated from the rest of the building by metal partitions and fireproof doors. What primer is used when maximum protection of the metal is desired? Epoxy. What type of tests can be performed to identify existing paint finishes? Apply a coat of engine oil or MEK to a small area. What causes blushing when applying dope or lacquer, and how can it be prevented? Doping under humid conditions, heating the room or using blush retarding thinner. What is the purpose of using fungicidal dope when finishing aircraft fabric? To prevent microbiological deterioration rotting of the fabric. What are the identification markings required for United States registered fixed-wing aircraft? Letter N, followed by registration number, on both sides of the fuselage or on both sides of the vertical stab. Character heights 12 inches, solid lines 1/6 as thick as they are high. Letter N followed by the registration number, on both sides of the fuselage or on both sides of the vertical stab. Character, height 12 inches, solid lines 1/6 as thick as they are high. What should the color of registration markings be? The color of markings should contrast their background. What are two types of dope used for aircraft finishes? Nitrate and butyrate. What is the advantage of butyrate over nitrate? Less flammable. What would happen if dope was ever used over paint or enamel? It would have the tendency to lift and remove such materials. What is applied to metallic surfaces as a common resistant covering before the application of enamel or lacquer? Zinc chromate primer. What can be done to the surface of components to prevent filiform corrosion? Verify primer is completely cured. What are the most common methods of applying aircraft finishes? Dipping, brushing, or spraying? What type of paint may be used over any paint system that is in good condition? Epoxy top coats. What normally causes runs and sags in a spray application of a paint finish? Holding the gun too long in one place, or holding the gun too close. What causes orange peel or pebble finish? Incorrect spray gun settings, incorrect air pressure, incorrect paint viscosity, holding the gun too far from the work. Incorrect spray gun settings. Incorrect air pressure. Incorrect paint viscosity. Holding the gun too far from the work. What causes fisheyes in paint? Surface contamination. What is used to thin chromate primer? Toluene. What type of materials should be thoroughly protected when using paint remover? Synthetic rubber surfaces, aircraft tires, fabrics, and acrylics. What is zinc chromate used for? Primer for bare metal. What does paint blushing look like? Dull and hazy surface finish. What is the principal cause of filiform corrosion? Uncured primer. What causes paint dust? Poor surface prep and overspray. What types of paint are generally used on aircraft? Epoxy and enamel. Name some types of welding. Oxyacetylene gas shielded, bronzing, arc, plasma. What is an advantage of electric arc welding over gas welding? Less buckling and warping of the welded material. When gas welding, what should be turned off first? Acetylene, then the oxygen.
A comes before O.
What is bronzing? Bonding material has a lower melting point than metal being joined. Used for materials that are easily damaged by high heat. Silver soldering, copper bronzing, aluminum bronzing. What is the maximum safe pressure for acetylene gas when welding?
15 psi.
No greater than 15 psi. What is the function of flux when used in soldering? Removes oxides and prevents formation of new oxides, so the solder forms a strong bond. Flux erodes corrosion from the surface. Why must acid, coarse solder, never be used on electrical wire? Any acid flux that is left over will cause severe corrosion to the wire. Why is flux used on silver solder? It cleans the base metal of oxide to ensure a good bond. What type of weld joints must be used to weld magnesium? Only butt welds. Prevent trapping of contaminants. What is one method of controlling expansion when welding a joint? Tack welding. At intervals along the joint. When splicing tubing by the inner sleeve method, what method can be used to insert a tight-fitting inner sleeve into the replacement tube? Inner sleeve chilled and the outer sleeve heated to allow a tighter fit. How do you determine the correct size filler rod to be used in welding? By the thickness of the materials being joined. Too small, a burned weld. Too large, you won't get the proper penetration. How can dents at a steel tube cluster joint be repaired? Weld a steel patch over the dented area and surrounding tubes. What are the procedures for preparing a metal fuel tank for welding? Wash the interior of the tank with detergent. Then steam the interior for a minimum of 30 minutes. Fill the tank with CO2 gas. Seal the tank, except for a small vent hole. What is the purpose of using flux when welding aluminum? Flux removes oxides. By combining with them, flux dissolves below the surface of the puddle and floats the oxides to the surface where they can be removed. Why must all flux be removed from the metal after welding magnesium? Can result in severe corrosion if any flux is left on the metal. What must be done to successfully weld titanium? Must be shielded with an inert gas, such as helium or argon. What is gas-shielded arc welding? Gas shields around the arc to prevent the atmosphere from contaminating the weld. What are the advantages of gas-shielded arc welding? Stronger, more ductile, more corrosion-resistant weld. What shielding gases are used for gas tungsten arc welding, TIG? Helium and argon. What fuel is used for gas welding aluminum? Oxygen and hydrogen. Why is it desirable to use a soft flame when welding aluminum? To avoid blowing holes in the metal when the puddle is formed. What determines the amount of heat that will be applied to the work when welding by the oxyacetylene method? Torch tip diameter. What type of flame should be used when silver soldering? Neutral flame. What is meant by a soft flame? Flame makes no noise and doesn't push the weld. What will be the result of using a torch tip that is too large or small? Large, high heat, burning holes in metal. Small, low heat, poor penetration.